May 10th, 2025. Welcome to This Week in Waukesha, the podcast series. I'm your host, Downtown Donnie Brown, coming to you from the office of former Alderman Don Paul Brown in our beautiful Banting Park home. I am joined by our extraordinary producer, the mighty Max Martinson, who's actually producing from his home in downtown Milwaukee. Do I have that right, Max? Fantastic. And then I'm really honored to have as my guest tonight. I've been trying to get him on for a long time, but he's busy on Saturday mornings when I was doing radio and now even with the podcast. But we're glad he's able to join us tonight. Please welcome. This is Chris Moreau, our Vice President of Sales for Civic Media and the station manager for WAUK Radio. Do I have that correct, Chris? All of that? The titles?
Yeah, I think that most of them. Yes, I'm the statewide director or vice president of sales for Civic Media, the market manager for WAUK, and also for WRJN in Racine.
Fantastic. And for some of the listeners, Chris is no stranger to radio, a very established career, surpassing, I believe, 30 years. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah,
In radio?
by 20.
Yeah.
I'm entering my 52nd year in the radio
Wow.
industry this year. So,
Unbelievable.
yeah, I didn't think, when I was 14 years old, I could sit here and say that, but sure as heck, 51 last September, heading toward 52.
Wow. So you started as a teenager in radio, is that correct?
I did. I
Wow.
was fascinated with the business, looking out
Sure.
my bedroom window at the flashing tower lights of two local stations where I grew up. And I got a job cutting the grass at one when I was 14.
And where'd you
And
grow up again? I'm sorry.
in Racine,
Oh,
down in
that's right. Oh,
Racine.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay.
And I cut the grass. That was my job. And they let me, I finally trained myself and had help from the people in the building to learn how to run the equipment. And I practice every week after the lawn mowing how to be on the air. But it was at the time a beautiful elevator music station. I was
Yeah.
14 and wanted to rock and roll, but Percy Faith and Ray Conniff were the first songs I ever played on the
Nice.
radio, and did that for a couple of years.
My parents are big Ray Conniff fans.
Yeah.
So they were born in the 30s. But, Chris, your story, I don't know if you've ever seen the Ken Burns documentary on the history of country music.
Mm-hmm.
There's a story of Chris Christopherson who he basically gives up a career in the military to go into country music and gets basically disowned by his family. And he gets a job as a janitor at Sun Records, and that's what got him in the door. So it sounds like yours is a very familiar story. You're kind of like the Chris Christopherson of WRJN.
Yeah, if only that was the case. Yeah, that would have been great.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of young people do that. They've got an idea what they want to do and where they want to go. And, it literally it was a foot in the garage door, but it was a
yeah,
foot in the door for me
still
at the time. And
right.
luckily, I had a lot of people there, or several people there, who understood, the passion I had for it and let me learn.
Sure.
It was a great place to learn.
Yeah. So yeah, because I was going to ask you, like, my next question was to ask you about what you do for Civic Media statewide in your
Sure.
kind of your executive capacity. But I'm really fascinated about your history. Like, when were you a teenager when you started, like, as a disc jockey?
Yeah, that was the job,
Wow,
the grass
that was
cutting
so,
job,
yeah,
and it wasn't really a disc jockey, it was really an announcer
yeah,
who who would give the weather once an hour and the
sure,
station ID at quarter after and quarter till. But by the time I was 16, I had practiced enough and was hired across town at one of the stations Civic Media owns now,
okay,
WRJN. So I was 16, working a Saturday and a Sunday shift, and in the summer filling in for the full-time guys during school vacations,
sure.
and did that for a couple of years in my hometown. And here we are, now 50 years later, back with WRJN
It's come
again.
full
So
circle.
kind of full circle. And I've been
That's
in
got to
there
be really
once
special.
before in between those times.
Sure,
Back in
sure.
2010 through 15, I managed the property as well. So
Well, and it really is an iconic building and a great space. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
obviously, me being kind of a big, champion for Waukesha, I was sad that we'd left our studio on Wisconsin Avenue. But when you go to that studio in Racine,
yeah.
and again, this is new to me, I felt like Howard Stern. If you ever seen like his podcast or his radio
Oh
show,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
such a professional studio. The building was built for radio, and 50 years later, it not only
yeah.
survives the test of time, but it's really a fantastic
Right. And
facility.
the point of WAUK studios leaving downtown Waukesha doesn't take away from the effect that WAUK still covers Waukesha.
Yeah,
And when companies like Civic Media grow, you find ways to consolidate the assets you own,
Yeah.
right? And that was the perfect place to do that. Plenty of
Yep.
room and technically a great place to be. But the WAUK signal still comes into Waukesha. It
Yeah.
still, still spells part of Waukesha. So, the some people who have come to me and said, "Why did you leave the city?" Well, the signal
We
didn't
haven't.
leave the city. It's just the building did,
Yeah.
and you still have the same shows, the same
Sure.
content, the same local news coming in. So, and of course, a show like this that focuses really on Waukesha, and
Yeah.
that's what we need to be. But the
Yeah.
signal of WAUK is so big,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that when you think about it as a company trying to maximize your assets, you can hear 540 WAUK in Fond du Lac, like a local
Right.
station, and all the way down to the northern suburbs of Chicago
Yeah.
and from Watertown to the lakeshore. So it's got a big signal.
It's
And I
huge.
think our responsibility, with the programming we originate and the mission we serve is to serve as many people as we can with that
Hmm.
signal.
Hmm.
So Waukesha is definitely a part of it and a big part of it,
Yeah.
surrounding Milwaukee County.
Hmm.
But we want to have a little bigger view of who's out there and
Yeah.
do our best to serve everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. That's terrific. And I when I started in that studio that we had, or and really studio in name only, it was basically an office space that we were retrofitting for
Yeah,
radio
yeah,
in mid January of 2022. It took a long time to really get that space to be serviceable, from professional standards that you would know better than me. And then again, you walk into Racine and like you're in a whole other world that's all
yeah,
about professionally produced radio. So it
yeah.
is a pretty cool scene there in Radio
It is.
Park on
It is.
Victory Drive. So yeah, so that's great. But um, what do you do for Civic Media statewide? Tell us more. For the
Well, my
Waukesha listeners,
my
what?
primary function for the corporation is to find opportunities to give local businesses in all the markets that Civic Media is in a voice on the air through advertising and marketing campaigns. Um, One of the best things about radio is still 93% of adults listen to the radio. So if you
Yeah.
own a business or you have a company that's trying to attract people, radio advertising is probably one of the most efficient ways to get people
Mhm.
into your business. And
Yeah.
because we have 24 signals across the state of Wisconsin,
Wow.
we can cover so many people with so many messages, but you don't have
Right.
to do it just on the network of Civic Media. Now, if
Mhm.
you're the Wisconsin Milk Marketing Board or the Wisconsin Lottery, you want to be heard in all 24 radio stations, we can do that for you. But if you've got a business in Waukesha that wants to attract people in Southeast Wisconsin, you advertise on WAUK.
Yeah.
If you're in Green Bay, you go on WGBW. If you're in um, Eau Claire or the Chippewa Valley, you go to WCFW. We've
Mhm.
got those local opportunities to advertise for
Right.
local businesses.
Yeah.
And really, that's the mission of Civic Media is to serve local communities across the state. So really what I do is I lead a staff of, I think we're at about 20 account executives across the
Wow.
state to help them explain to businesses how we can do that with radio messaging, digital
Mhm.
messaging, through podcast advertising on shows like this. Everything we do is something businesses can latch onto. And
Yeah.
part of my job is to find the right people to do that job, to train them, to retain them, to motivate them, and to help fund the mission of
Sure.
Civic Media through broadcast sales.
Sure. So I hate talking about this with um I've learned that President Trump is they're looking to scrap the funding for National Public Radio,
Yeah.
which I've always been a fan of, and I was actually turned on to public radio in college at Michigan State. One of my best friends was from Western rural Michigan. His family were
Mhm.
cherry producers, cherry farmers, and public radio, that was their only source of media
Sure.
that they felt was also very reliable. And people, it's always been written off as liberal, but they're funded, the foundation funding is very conservative foundations because they,
Mhm.
they really give both sides. But is there kind of a market opportunity for civic media because we have coverage in these rural areas, knowing that um, these NPR affiliate, I hate to say competition, but these these affiliates in these local markets are under a great threat or a great financial threat.
And I think you're right. They're under a threat, and I think it's well. I don't agree with the decision to cut the Corporation
No,
for Public Broadcasting back, and it hasn't happened yet.
yeah,
We still have court battles, I'm sure, to go through it.
sure.
But we don't necessarily see National Public Radio or NPR public stations as competition to civic media. They're a complement to it.
Hmm.
They're a very credible source for local
Yeah,
news, but more so, they take that stance on a more national scale.
yeah, they're very yep.
And that's important. People need to know that. The
Hmm.
difference between your local NPR or public station and civic media is civic media is doing the local news. In each of our
Yeah,
markets, we have a news person. We're expanding our news department. In some cities, we partner with some of the local newspapers that have been diminished or trying to hang on and promote that. So there's a different product that comes from civic media
yeah,
and from public radio.
hmm,
And I think they complement each other. We both
yeah,
have the same goal to serve the public interest, and I think
right,
that's above and beyond many other radio companies
sure,
these days. And I would hate to see them go away because not
yeah,
only, I mean, they're respected competitors, that's for
hmm,
sure, but they enhance what the world needs and what
yeah,
communities needs, and that's
yeah,
local, accurate, dependable
sure.
information. Yeah,
When I like how you highlight what differentiates us is we have a very local focus,
right,
which is an
right.
appeal to potential advertisers. And so a great example is I just learned last night at the city council meeting, um, they gave out the Landmark Commission Awards, which is a big deal every year, in part of as part of Historic Preservation Month. Recipients have contributed to the historic preservation restoration of Waukesha's rich architectural history. And so a certificate of merit went to Nicholas Martinez for his work at the building at 910 914 Clinton Street, the W.T.
Hmm,
Lyles building, a famous building, a beautiful
sure.
piece of architecture. The John M. Shane Connect Award. John was a guest on my radio show, to David Coop and his family. David passed away last year and was honored posthumously for his work in historic preservation. From 1984 to 2010, David served as the secretary of the Landmarks Commission. And Waukesha's Landmarks Commission is very active and very vocal, and they played a great part at honoring the history of our great city. And for anybody that's never seen it, all you have to do is walk Main Street in Waukesha to see in downtown Waukesha to see the great works of architecture. And
And
again,
that's one of
that's
the
great. That's great
yeah.
content. That's rich content that we get excited about as listeners.
And that's one of the things, as a guy who lives in Waukesha now, and I've been here on and off for over 20 some years.
Wow, longer
It's
than me.
just those walks down through downtown Waukesha are
Yeah.
so cool. And
Oh
hitting some
yeah.
of the sidewalk restaurants, and it's not like you're sitting in New York with a big sidewalk cafe out there.
Yeah.
You're sitting on the sidewalk in some
Yeah.
folding chairs and card
Yeah.
tables and enjoying the people and the
Yeah.
ambience of downtown.
Yeah.
But I mean, we enjoy the Friday nights in summer when you can hang out
Friday Night
downtown
Live's
and
right on the
walk in the
corner.
street,
Yeah.
Friday Night Live and the farmers market and all that stuff. But yeah, and exactly the kind of thing you just talked about and just read, you're not going to hear that on one of the big Milwaukee radio stations because
Right.
they're looking at big Milwaukee news. But something
Yeah.
like Civic Media, where we do look at communities,
Sure.
that's something you may hear Stuart J. Waddles feature on a noon newscast someday.
Yeah.
So good stuff and a good thing to
That
bring up.
really is. And it's so we're doing this special broadcast on a Wednesday evening, and that's why Max is doing this from home, because on May 17th, I will be at the food pantry serving Waukesha County's Breakfast Club, their annual fundraiser. And I'm proud to be on the board and be present on the board. And so I'm expected to give a few comments. But, um, I mentioned this because there's so much, there's a real sense of community here. People really get involved. And you have to look no further than charities like the food pantry, where people are volunteering and they're delivering meals on the weekends and um, serving families. And unfortunately, food insecurity is a real thing, even in the state, one of the state's most affluent um, counties, like Waukesha County. But it's oh, I kind of lost my train of thought there, Chris. But the fact is, there's so many opportunities for people to participate in
Yeah.
Waukesha life and really get the most out of it. So we are talking about some of the great high school plays that were put on that some of the
Sure.
grandparents told me. I know what it was. I was at a city food pantry event, and one of the volunteers had come up, and he lives all the way out in Delafield, and he said he liked he used to listen to the radio show. He still listens to the podcast, and he likes that I have high school students on, student athletes, or other students excelling in other areas, teachers and coaches,
Yep. Yep.
and because he said those those young people have a great story to tell, and they deserve that exposure. And so it is an honor to really to be a part of that focus that civic media stations like
Mhm.
WAUK provide, and then also, of course, with our podcast format.
Yep. Yeah.
So
And and podcasts are really an extension of the radio. It's really the radio on demand, right?
yeah,
When a
yeah,
radio show is on from 6 to 8 a.m., you got to be there 6 to 8 a.m. Monday
yeah,
morning to hear the show. Here, we can take those shows and we put them in the can, so to speak, and upload them
yeah,
to the podcast platform. But shows like this, we promote all week on the radio. And when
yeah,
somebody has that 20 or 30 minutes to sit back and absorb it without interruptions or road
yeah,
rage, what a great way to do it. So,
yeah, yeah,
like we said before, it's, we try to use all the various avenues we have to
yeah.
provide the service. And audio goes beyond the radio. And
It really does.
and
Yeah,
and the internet goes beyond audio and goes into video and
yeah,
all the different things we can do. That's why we're called Civic Media, not
yeah.
Civic
That's a
Radio.
great.
So,
So you'll appreciate this, Chris. My guest. You lately, if they have a lot to talk about, we'll have them on two podcasts in a row. And so last week I had Kelly Piasek, who is she's president of the school board,
mhm,
and she's considered a controversial figure because her politics, very very right of center. But there's a whole other side to her. She's a very devoted professional in research and mental and behavioral health. She basically established the research center at Rogers Behavioral Health,
hmm,
and doing some really groundbreaking work there, by the way. And so, since May is Mental Health Awareness Month, it was a real great opportunity for people to see this other side of her and the work that she's doing and how important it is in the areas of mental
sure.
health, which obviously is um, we're peeling away at that's like knocking that stigma away
Yep.
that families still experience about mental health. And so it's great again with civic media that we have that opportunity to kind of get different sides of the story from
Mhm.
people that maybe we don't know as well as we thought we did.
No, I
So
agree. I agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what can we look forward to with civic media growing? Obviously they're up to like 24 stations now. Any new
Yeah.
developments you can share with us?
Well, we're working always on improving our digital footprint, and that's a way for us to reach people, whether it's on the radio, whether it's on a laptop computer, these cell phones. I mean, they're in everybody's face. What
Yeah,
a
no doubt.
great way to stay in touch. And
Yep.
and the more we do that, the more we grow, the more people we add who can keep up with the various platforms that we present on, and we
Sure.
can and we can make them accessible to people. That
Yeah.
again, that's the goal. Let's get the message of
Yep.
democracy. Let's get the message of fair play out. Let's
Hmm.
keep the community together, and pulling together is probably the biggest thing we want to do with civic media. And that includes shows like yours, Don, the podcast This Week in Waukesha,
Yeah.
programs you hear on WAUK, and any program you see on our podcasting
Sure.
platform. So
And I see your Earl Earl Ingram. I almost called him. I either call him Earl Campbell or Earl Weaver. Like we always used to joke
no,
about that in the radio days.
Earl
But now
Ingram.
he has now left the radio ranks and joined us here in the podcast world. And
Yeah.
Max was involved in that press conference today, and we're really excited about that. I think Earl's
Yeah.
going to reach a larger audience, and
Earl's
um,
he's got a mission right now. The lead pipe and the lead paint the city of Milwaukee that extend to the suburbs and all the way
yeah,
out here. It's a
yeah,
huge problem that's not being and hasn't been appropriately addressed. It's
yeah,
going to be, and Civic Media and Earl Ingram are taking the lead on that. And you're going to hear a lot more about it. And it doesn't just affect people in Milwaukee. It's a statewide deal. And we're
sure,
proud that Earl's taken this on as a mission, and
yeah,
Civic Media is going to back him up on that all the way.
sure. Chris Morrow, Civic Media's, so we say statewide head of sales and the station manager for WAUK
Yep. Yeah.
and WRJN. I'm really honored. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's
Oh, no,
great.
I appreciate being on, Don. It's really fun.
Yeah, and
I'll never give up a chance to be on a radio show or a podcast. Trust me.
love it. And and a Waukesha resident, and we got to have you on soon. We want to talk more about life in Waukesha and different
Yeah,
perspectives, and
let's do it, Don.
really grateful for your gift of time and in
Certainly.
sharing, and also
After
too
my
that history you have too. I'm sure there's more great
oh,
stories to tell, and so we look forward to having you on future podcasts. And want to thank everybody for listening in and sticking around for podcasts too, and thanking my producer, the mighty Max Martinson, for all the great work he does, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Chris, thanks again, and thanks again to our listeners.
thank you, Don. Thanks, Max.